Welcome to the Transportation Exchange podcast. I'm your host, Jason Cuddy, and on today's episode, we welcome Michael Sbrocchi, who is the VP of Sales and Customer Care at Speedy Transport Group. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for inviting me to have a conversation. And it's been quite some time.
It has, and it's you get to know a lot of people in the industry. It's a small world, and ours is remotely smaller with nothing to do with the industry. So I think going back, my math is bad, at least 15, 16 years. We were in a band together for a short, brief time. We did our tour of, I think, Toronto and London, Ontario, and that was it. It was fun. But yeah, that's kind of how we connected all those years ago.
It seems like forever ago, but it was fun. It was
looks
fun. Like we're both still having some fun, so that's okay.
Exactly. And I think when I met you, you had just started teaching. So your path to our industry is a little different. So maybe give us a little bit of background of kind of where you started and how you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my path into transportation industry in general was definitely not a planned one. Quite a while ago, I guess it would have been 2004, 2005, I became an elementary school teacher and did that for a little while, and taught locally in Brampton and Mississauga, did some teaching in Switzerland, did a lot of traveling, and kind of on my way to becoming a vice principal. One of my best friends, we were out one night, Jared Martin being one of my best friends, he kind of jokingly said, "Hey, have you ever thought about working at Speedy Transport?" And, we may have had a few drinks at that moment in time in our systems. And I said no, and kind of laughed and went on with the evening. And, about 6 months after that occurred, the exact same conversation happened. "Hey, have you ever thought about working at Speedy Transport?" And I said, "That's a very strange question," again, and kind of laughed it off and went on with the evening again. And I think it was the third time where he asked me again, "Hey, have you ever thought about working at Speedy Transport?" And I looked at him like, "We haven't started drinking yet. Like, why are you asking me this? I don't understand." And it was just kind of a moment where I'm like, "Okay, what are you asking here? I don't know. Like, I'm about to become a vice principal. I'm very happy as a teacher and the role I play at the school I was working at the time, and I had a vision of where I was going in education and as an educator." So he just kind of said, "I thought you might be a good fit, and just thought something you might want to consider." And I said, "Oh, cool." I'm like, "I appreciate that, but no." And then on went the rest of the night, and he just kept asking. Like he just kept asking, and that's why I kind of say I was friend hunted into the industry, so to speak, because he consistently asked probably at least every 4 to 6 months. And I guess it was, wow, it does seem like a long time ago, but I was a vice principal at elementary school, and he asked again. And I said, "Okay, like, that's enough. Like, what really, like, what is it that you really want?" And it's like, "I just want you to come take a look. Just come over to Speedy Transport, come check out our headquarters, just meet some people, get an idea of what we do, and then let's continue the conversation after you do that." And I said, "Okay. I mean, that's pretty easy. I can handle that. That's not much of a commitment." So, it was either Christmas break or March break. One of the benefits of the educational world is that time you get away from work. And I went into Speedy Transport and walking into the building, and I had probably been there as a late teenager or early in my 20s, maybe to pick up something, but never really paid attention to the building or the facility, or certainly not the operation. I walked in there and was like, "Well, this is a pretty big place." And, my mind of what Speedy Transport was at that moment in time was essentially Jared and 10 trucks. Didn't know anything about really what what the company was, what the industry was, what he really did. I just knew he was always quite busy with work and often late to, dinners or parties or evenings at the bar, but never really understood what he did and what Speedy Transport was. And, that first kind of walk through of the facility and meeting new people, was like, okay, this is bigger than I thought. And this is even more foreign than I thought. So what is it that you want me to do here? And, kind of Jared just let me know that he thought I'd, make a real good addition to the team, from a partnership management standpoint or a sales standpoint. And I was a little confused by that at first. Just said, exactly what am I selling? It's like, well, you're going to sell our service. I'm like, what is that? LTL? What is that? It's like, and he just said, listen, like, you are good with people. You've been trained to manage people. You've been trained to be with people. You already work with the community at large, being an elementary school vice principal. Like, you know people, and this industry needs people that understand other people. And that's why I think he'd be a really good addition. And I told him I would think about it. And I did another visit, I guess, a few months later, probably on my March break. And we did another walkthrough and I asked a lot of questions to a lot of different people. And we kind of sat down and, being part of the school board, you're able to take a leave of absence from your position. So at that point in time, we kind of shook hands and I said, listen, let's do this. And the one thing when we shook hands, we just both agreed that if it ever interfered with our friendship, we just kind of called the experiment off. And yeah, that 1 year leave of absence turned into a 2nd year leave of absence. That 2nd year leave of absence turned into a resignation from the school board and my vice principalship, and that partnership management position eventually evolved into my current role as vice president, and our friendship has flourished. We the business has flourished, but our friendship has also kind of taken the next step because I think we kind of understand each other a little bit more on a different level, as opposed to, we were great friends, but before we started working together, and I would say we're even better friends now. So it's very positive, and it's not, I don't think it's a common story. I think a lot of times when people start talking about working with family or friends, you kind of hear the horror stories that come out of that situation. And it hasn't been that way. And it doesn't look like it's ever going to get that way. So that's very positive, and it's exciting. And I don't think I could have ever really expected that when I started, that it would be exciting, like as exciting as it is, even though like we're moving freight. Like, how exciting can that be, right? But there's some really cool things that happen in this world, from a transportation perspective that, still catch me by surprise.
Well, it's a wild story of how you got in. I mean, you hear some interesting stories, and clearly the relationship. It's nice to hear that it's stayed and grown, because as you mentioned, that usually doesn't happen. And part of it, we'll dig into, I think, the culture, and I think that's a big piece that I always find exciting about you guys, from a social media into branding, and how you position and present yourself in the industry. And I do want to dig into that. But for those that don't know the full history of Speedy, and in all fairness, as I was, doing a little bit more research before chatting with you, Jared does a good job, of yourself and the marketing team there, as far as, tying the history to the current. But I didn't realize the company went back as far as it did. 1941, I believe.
Yeah,
downtown Toronto as a parcel pickup and delivery with a motorcycle. You don't hear those stories too often.
No, it's pretty crazy how, like how deep rooted the history of the name and the brand and the company is. And it's pretty cool to see what's happened with it, since, Jared took over the CEO position in 2012, and what's happened to the company since then. has been amazing in terms of a rebranding and creating this identity within the marketplace that is quite well known. What's really interesting about Jared as a leader is that he's essentially worked every position at the company. From janitor and forklift driver and an operator and customer service and international operations. Like he's done it all within the operation. So it's cool to have a leader that knows the ins and outs of what the job was and where it's evolved to. And part of that evolution of the brand includes the evolution of the culture of the brand. And one of the challenges that kind of Jared proposed to me when kind of onboarding me at Speedy Transport was, he gave me this really obscure challenge of, hey, I want you to help change the culture at Speedy Transport. But not only do I want to help you change the culture at Speedy Transport, I want you to help Speedy Transport change the culture of the industry. And I was just like, well, that's crazy. Let's do it. So how do we do that? Like, how do we change the culture of a whole industry? That seems so daunting. But that's such an interesting and cool challenge as well. So why not? And I think part of that is when you look at what he's created in terms of the brand recognition and kind of, the swagger in a sense of the brand, it's recognizable, but it's, at one point maybe too cowboyish, but it's not. It's real. It's transparent. It's raw, and it's so cool to now understand that is being recognized. And I mean, I think we'll probably get into a little bit later in how that's touching on our messaging at a larger scale in terms of what we're doing with our equipment in a lot of areas. But the brand and the vision of the brand comes from Jared, and it comes from a lot of conversation. It comes from a lot of thought. It comes from understanding the people that are here at Speedy Transport, and really trying to identify how we build the next generation, not just for SFTG or Speedy Transport, but also for the industry, and that's the challenge. I think for a long time, and again, I've been in it now almost 6 years. But in a lot of marketplaces, you go and you talk about transportation and trucking, and nothing was really changed in decades, it seems, and it's, well, why is that? So, we want to consistently push, and not necessarily push to be different, just to be different, but we want to push to be better. And we want to be pushed to be better for ourselves, for our employees and their families. And we'll also push to be better for our account base and our partners. And we kind of owe that to them, right? To kind of keep getting better. And complacency doesn't really have a place within our company. It's not something I don't think we'll ever become. So that's exciting for me. Might not be exciting for everyone, but it's exciting for me.
Well, I mean, I can speak from the outside looking in. Yeah, I definitely see it. You see the presence, and with the company your size, traditionally you see this sort of focus on a not necessarily rebrand. It's not a rebrand, but definitely a definition and a purpose of who you guys are in the marketplace, what you want to be and what you want to see the industry become. Mm-hmm. Usually you see that in a much smaller company to try and, build that up. You guys, 250 plus owner operators, one of the top 25 trucking companies, in Canada from a size point of view. This isn't a small venture. This isn't a little company that's just trying to be, make some noise. You guys already make noise in your presence. So then to take that presence and change kind of the vibe of it, for lack of better words, is a huge undertaking, but it's being heard, it's being felt. And you said we'll dive in a bit more. It's being seen. There's a visible presence, but it's definitely noticed. To speak from the outside to you guys, that I see it, I feel it, and I notice it, and it's exciting. You said it's the industry. I've been at it, 20 something years, and it's kind of done the same thing with different people. But I think as you get into this new generation, you have technology, you have different platforms to get the message out, and people are leveraging it, they're using it, and they're finding creative ways to do it. And I think creativity is kind of what's always lacked kind of in the industry. It's always kind of been, old school. You hop in a truck, you drive back and forth, and it is what it is. And it worked. I mean, in all fairness, it worked. There was nothing wrong with it. But it does take, some people from the outside going, how do we make this a little bit more fun? How do we make it a little bit more accessible to people who don't know our industry? And how do we, like I said, change the culture? Let's bring other things in, bring someone like yourself on board to a trucking company to run, the culture and interact with the customers. That makes sense, because then that's how you change the guard slowly and change the tone of the conversation of the industry.
Well, what's really interesting about the industry, from my perspective, early on, and still it kind of continues to grow, and we really need to kind of advocate. And when we talk about the industry as a whole and capacity issues and driver shortages and especially now during what's happened over the last 14, 15 months through the pandemic, how do we get a new generation of people to join the industry and kind of make it cool and sexy? How does that work? Like, I talked to my father-in-law, who actually used to be a line haul driver, not for Speedy, but for a couple of different companies, and this is a while ago. But he was telling me the story. A truck driver used to be kind of just the same type of person in terms of, I guess, a social outlook as a police officer or a firefighter. If you need help, just go ask a truck driver. Like you said, that was kind of the way at one point in time. And I don't think, whatever's happened over the last maybe 2-3 decades in trucking to kind of blur that societal perspective on trucking hasn't done anything good for the industry. And when we talk about the industry in general, it's usually attached to some sort of negative experience or event. And what the pandemic has done is it's put a spotlight on the trucking industry. It's put a spotlight on the supply chain industry as a whole, and has really shown society and the public in general that this is an important piece of what happens every day. And I think there's a real jumping off point here in terms of how do we leverage the experience of the pandemic and the positive spotlight that has been put on the supply chain to now bring in future generations into the industry. And as an industry, we're thinking about that at Speedy and at SMTG, but as an industry, we all have to be thinking that to help curtail, the consistent driver shortage and the consistent, shortage of dock staff and dock personnel and office personnel. It has to be a fun place. So that's a crazy thing to think about, I think, because the industry moves everything. It drives everything we need in every city. And I would have never thought about this 6 years ago. Like never. It's funny because I remember even when I first got into the industry, I would be at the grocery store and I'm like, oh, what's this? And I'd like, hey, where was this manufactured? Okay. Oh yeah, where did this ship out of? For like hunting for leads, like sit in a room and you realize everything in the room that you're in was on a truck at some point in time, but you don't really understand that until you start really thinking about it. And when you're in it, it's like, wow, there's so much that has to happen to actually get a package from point A to point B or to end user. And we need to continue to drive the change for bringing the next generation in and making it an attractive industry to be in, and having some fun doing it, I think is going to be important. I mean, people will always talk, oh, the millennials this, the millennials that, and it's like, okay, well, that doesn't even have to be a relevant conversation if you set yourself up to engage your personnel and engage your employee base, to dive into a culture and an attitude that feels good. And we've, that has been, I think, a struggle for the industry, and we've certainly struggled with it at Speedy Transport, but that's also why we've identified it as a way to change. We try to focus on emotional intelligence and trucking. Like, I'm not sure if that's ever really talked about very often in the industry, right? And that's not even just from a sales perspective. It's just even internally, how can we be better with each other in the way we interact on a day-to-day basis to help people understand what we do is an important thing. And that's how we're trying to kind of have the culture percolate, at Speedy.
Yeah, and then it makes sense because I know, our generation, for the most part was told, hey, you finish high school, you go to university, you get your degree, and you go work in an office, or if you've picked a certain skill like teaching or doctoral, and then you follow the path to continue on your education and go down that path. None of what makes our industry tick was really on our radar. It wasn't presented to us as an option that, hey, you could go work at a trucking company or a leasing company or a repair shop. And you don't have to necessarily be the driver or the technician, but you could be in charge of the finance. You could be a salesperson. There's other roles than, two things you think of, a mechanic or a driver in this industry that makes it tick. And I think it's slowly changing. And I think, like you said, the pandemic, I think, brought a lot of light to the drivers, which was needed, and get them some respect, because obviously the only thing we've ever heard is usually the stuff in the news, which is not always positive. So it's good to get some positivity back onto the driver's side, which helps them, which also helps with driver retention and recruitment for guys. But it also, like you said, is shown without that network in place, nothing happens. None of the work from home activities happen if some guys don't work from home. And, it's definitely highlighted, and you guys have done your part in your involvement in moving gear and moving equipment, to support those who can't work at home during the pandemic. And it's brought a great light to it. And like I said, now how do you leverage this momentum as far as visibility, add some culture shift to it to make it a place for the younger generation to poke their head and say, hey, this looks like an interesting avenue to explore. How do I get involved? And I know a lot of the associations do a good job to try and get young leaders involved and pull them in that way. But I think an onus is on yourself, like the company, us, other companies, to go out to schools, get to the kids at a younger age, let them know this is a viable and great career opportunity. If you just do a little bit of research, and you'll find something you like, and making it fun, making it exciting, and using some different approaches of people's talent is a key way to pull people in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the other part that I think we talked about at the beginning, but it's been interesting, and part of the way we drive this is, the branding and the social media. I mean, marketing is always a huge piece. Again, not always tied to transportation, but there's lots of companies out there that move freight, and making yourself visible in that sea is a challenge. And social media is a great tool. You guys do a great job with it. It's constant. The branding's on point. You definitely get the messaging, as you mentioned earlier, as far as, what you guys stand for, what you're trying to do, and kind of what the brand means in the industry. But the piece I think that people will see a lot of, especially if you're on the road, and, I'm sitting in my office right now seeing trucks go by with their logo, which is great. But you guys have leveraged your trailer space, from a campaign of social messaging and leveraging, your tools. Again, it all ties to the branding. It all makes sense. It's all real, I think, and authentic. I think that's the biggest piece behind it. It's all authentic. But it's, where did that come from? The idea to use the trailers with the graffiti art, which is phenomenal, that you see across the fleet, and kind of getting that messaging out there.
Yeah, it's so, the idea of marketing and brand awareness is definitely huge for us. I'll use our IG page to help describe who we are and what we do, because it's a great snapshot into kind of where we're going and how we continue to evolve. And when you speak about the trailers and kind of the the way we've evolved in being able to put certain messaging on them. I mean, that's pretty interesting. So I guess it would have been 2018. At some point in 2018, Jared had been introduced to a graffiti artist, and they met through a mutual friend, and I believe it was a mutual friend, and they kind of just had this idea of, Jared had this idea, hey, like what if the trailer was your canvas, instead of a wall or a piece of hanging art. Like, what if we got you to graffiti a trailer? And Jesse Pacho, also known as Art of Fade, was the gentleman that Jared was speaking with, and kind of that I think may have caught Jesse by surprise. To be like, you want me to do what? And I think it really just turned into this real another little experiment. Like, hey, what is this going to look like, right? So Jesse ended up with his friend Kedri tagging a trailer, and the initial trailer that was tagged essentially was almost like a kind of an homage to Speedy Transport and where it came from. Certain hashtags and certain words and names on there that meant something to the history of the company, but also other hashtags and names that showed kind of where we were going. So Jared and his family grew up in Regent Park. Jared grew up in Regent Park, and even the idea of graffiti art and what graffiti meant for Regent Park, and bringing Jesse on board to kind of commission him to work on a trailer was kind of even an homage to Jared's roots in terms of being, from Regent Park and showing the evolution of, it's interesting, one essence is the evolution of Speedy, but it's also the evolution of Jared. And I don't know if he's going to like me saying that, but we all grow and mature, and Jared's journey into where he is now, again, from forklift operator / custodian to CEO, hasn't been an easy one. I think he took CEO position in 2012, and within 8 or 9 weeks, there was one of the biggest fatalities in trucking history occurred, where we lost one of our drivers. And that's his entrance into being CEO. So it's he's gone through a number of things and has evolved as a person and a businessman and a leader in his position. And I think the homage and that initial trailer was just like a continuation of his evolution, and continues to be, because that one trailer ended up turning into, I think we're on our 8th or 9th now, which is pretty cool. And the first trailer was kind of the homage and got tagged. The second trailer, I believe the second trailer might have been a Transformers trailer, kind of transforming the industry, going with that theme. Actually, that might have been came after our We the North trailer. So the trailers have become kind of a reflection of who we are and what we're doing, but also what's happening within our communities. So when the Raptors were in the middle of their playoff run before they won the championship, we created a We the North Speedy Transport trailer, and we actually had it running downtown during some of the playoff games, just kind of pumping up the crowd and showing our support for the Raptors, which was pretty cool. We did a Kobe Bryant graffiti trailer, and then more recently, with what had happened in the States, and Jesse and Jared were in the talks of creating another trailer when George Floyd was murdered, and that kind of, I think, put the two of them and Jared and Jesse in another direction as to, okay, what kind of messaging are we going to do on this one? And we created the Everyone versus Racism trailer, the initial one. So we kind of parked it somewhat illegally outside the OVO Center, and Jesse and Kedry went to work. And on one side you have Malcolm X, and the other side you have Martin Luther King, and it's a very, very powerful piece. And it has the names of all, well, not all, but a number of people that have been murdered because of their color of their skin, and it's not right. It's what's happened in not just in the States, but it continues to happen. Racism is not right. So that it's a big stance to take, but it's an important one. And right after we finished that trailer, we decided we were going to do a second one. And the second one, we ended up, we're like, well, we're at the OVO Center. Where can we go next? So at this point in time, we're in the midst of the pandemic. So we thought, hey, maybe we'll try for Yonge and Dundas. So we ended up having an exhibit at Yonge and Dundas Square for 4 days, and Kedry and Jesse ended up painting another Everyone versus Racism trailer. One side is Colin Kaepernick saying "Stand for Something." The other side is Muhammad Ali, "Impossible is Nothing." And so what's cool about this, and what's cool about these two particular trailers from a societal messaging standpoint, is they're on the road every day. Like, these trailers are on the road. They're hitting docks constantly every day that goes by, and right at the back, where the doors are, it just says "Everyone versus Racism," and you can't hide from that messaging. We have an opportunity to spread awareness, love, togetherness, messaging that doesn't really typically identify with a lot of trucking companies, to think like, hey, let's spread this messaging. And it's important. It's important for us to be able to take a position on what's happening in society and say, we're not okay with this, but we need to work together to make things better. And I think part of the evolution of these trailers, and it'll continue, there's another one in the works. The last one was almost a lot for, or done for kind of mental health and awareness. There's a big smiley face on the nose of the trailer, on the skirt, it says, "You got this, fam." And they're really pieces. They're moving pieces of art, but they're also massive moving billboards that allow us to put positive messaging out there. And I think that's different, and it is purposeful. It is to get positive messaging out there, and for people to think about their actions and what they do and how they can actually contribute to society in a positive way, as opposed to kind of sitting around and doing nothing. We also have, we've also done some really cool wraps with some of our trailers. We did a Raptors championship wrap. We did a Kobe Bryant tribute wrap, which is pretty cool. And again, Jared's a massive Kobe Bryant fan, but I think we all kind of are. And when that news hit, we wanted to really do something special to kind of pay tribute to his legacy and his daughters and all the others that were lost in that crash. And it's just something that we can do to continue spreading positive messaging. And, I don't see that ever stopping with our brand. I think we'll continue to push for, whether it be graffiti or very specialized rap trailers, we'll continue to push certain narratives and messages with our trailers. And again, the goal there is to kind of really spread awareness and love more than anything.
Yeah, and it's very on point. It's timely. Like you said, the messaging is timely with what we see. But it's a chance that someone can leverage current resources that are being unused and get the messaging out there. It sends a positive message, but it comes from a very authentic place. Like, when you watch companies, whether it's commercials, some other companies are definitely changing the theme, changing the tone, getting on board with some more social issues, using their platform and their branding to bring awareness. I mean, Bell does a great job with the Let's Talk Day. So it's definitely, it's definitely coming, for lack of better words, more mainstream to approach these issues on a larger scale. But sometimes it doesn't come up from an authentic place, but definitely from from the messaging behind it, the story behind it, it's authentic. And I think that's what makes a big difference. It's absorbed differently. I think when it's authentic and it's real, people feel it. The way you guys have approached it, the way you even get the art on, as you mentioned, it's all legitimately authentic and real. And it's not, you're not doing it for show. You're doing it because it's what you do and what you believe in. And we talked about the culture, and it kind of all wraps around it. It's like, yeah, like you said, you don't see it as much. And I thank you guys for taking the step and being bold enough to put yourself out there and on purpose work at changing the culture. And I think it will go a long way, and you'll see other companies start to come on board as you get through different generations. And a lot of it is just a generation thing as guys change hands, people leave, newer generations take over, but then start leveraging the technologies there, an Instagram page. Most people that work for these companies can't get on Instagram. It's blocked from the servers, right? So to some extent, you're limited to what you can do at work, but that'll change, but you're starting to see it using Instagram. I mean, LinkedIn seems to be the go-to for a lot of guys, which makes sense. It's a corporate platform. It's a great way to spread the corporate message. But to reach the next generation, to reach the next audience of the people that will be driving, that will be working, that will carry, your company, our company beyond you and me, you got to reach them a different way, right? They're not on LinkedIn today, so no. The Instagram, the Facebook platforms that I have no clue about that my kids are probably on, those are the ones to use to get there. But the trailers also is a great way to just visibly see it and then start tying everything together. So it's a huge task, but I definitely say you guys have done a great job at making the impact and making it seen and making it felt. And I hope more guys hop on board. Again, it's got to come from an authentic place and a willingness to do it, but who definitely see the value it brings when you do it, whether it's from retaining customers, getting new customers, from strictly a business point of view. People want to work with people who are like-minded, right? And if you are standing up for certain issues that you believe in, and your customers are like-minded in the same way, they want to partner with you, they want to work with you, they want to support you. And it's so, at the end of the day, we're running businesses, but why not try and make the world a bit better place while we're at it? So
absolutely. I what I really love about the trailers is it's less about Speedy or SFTG, and the focus is solely on whatever message is on the trailer. I mean, our branding for Speedy equipment is amazing. Like, yes, when it's just like graffiti and no graffiti, no special wrap, just our regular branding, it's already there. Like, people that's already recognizable. But when you get to touch a larger audience through through that sort of medium that is rarely used to spread that sort of messaging, it makes you feel good. And that's something I actually really struggled with in terms of moving industries, like going from education where you can feel like you're making a difference every day in a child's life or family's life or within the community, to understanding, well, how can I make a difference, or how are we making a difference as a transportation company in the world or within society, right? And so, for me, I love that direction of being able to spread positivity, and it's not even a service. Even if someone's not using our service, it's there.
Yeah, it's still there.
The positive messaging is there, and so essentially we get to make that difference every day just by having those units on the road.
Yeah, and I think that was smart on Jared's part to bring you on board, recognizing what you brought as an educator, and obviously transitioning through the ranks of education, recognizing your strength in it, your passion for it. But yeah, it's about leading people, right? And it's you're molding young people. Here's your chance to take everything you learned from there, apply it into our world. And figure out how do you mold and transition the people, same thing that you work with, to get to a certain goal. And it's a different mindset. And if you've always kind of lived in the same world, you don't approach it from a different point of view. So it's a smart transition to bring you on board, and we're happy to have you in our world.
No, it's fun. Yeah, I love it. It's been great.
Excellent, man. Well, I won't take up much of your time, but I do want to thank Mike for joining us today. And be sure to like and subscribe for notifications on new episodes, as well as share on all your social media channels that we've been talking about. And check out our website at www.rushtruckcenters.ca to catch up on past episodes. And as always, thanks for listening.